an inspirational icon to millions in India and globally. I would now request everybody to put their hands together and welcome our Honorable Finance Minister, who will now be giving her keynote address. Thank you so much.
To all the dignitaries on the dais, and an all-woman audience. This doesn't happen too often. It doesn't happen often at all. So I thank MentorMyBoard, who's thought about having a program of this nature and thought it appropriate to call me. So I'm very grateful to the organizers and of MentorMyBoard for this program, but of course for many other things about which I'll talk a bit later. I thank Mr. Mundra, a professional banker, former RBI Deputy Governor, and also today the head of the BSc. But if it's not going to be a news item, I would like to confess that this is the first time I'm entering into this hall. It takes some woman to think that it might be useful to have the finance minister come here, wow, at least for the first time. The woman may be a finance minister, but she's not found worth coming until before another woman has something to do with her. I'm not taking a punch at the BSc, let me be honest. But I take this opportunity much before I talk about MentorMyBoard to spare a minute on the BSc. Every Indian needs to be proud about BSc. It has stood a very long time in the history, doing activities which many countries are yet to find their feet on. BSc has remained as an iconic institution. It has weathered very many storms. And today, I think, if I can take this opportunity and take liberty, Mr. Mundra, if it is not misunderstood, I eagerly wish that the BSc becomes a lot more vibrant, a lot more representative of modern markets. It has all the strengths. It has got a huge history to be proud of. I'm sure it can also be very robust. And I look forward to the day when Mr. Mundra would say, "You threw a challenge at me, come see what it is today." Cool. Thank you, MentorMyBoard, for playing a very important role in a way a lot of us are talking about it, but you've actually started acting on it. Mentoring the new and aspirant directors on a company's board sounds easy, but because it is mentoring women, not because they are incapable of getting the training, but because of the inherent hesitancy in the minds of women, in the thoughts of women. This is all right, I'm contributing anyway, wherever I am, I don't need to get into the board. Because I think, not blaming the men, but because everywhere it is yet another prove yourself here too, which we don't want to do. boards are quite happy welcoming another professional, a man. I wouldn't say they're unhappy having another professional, a woman, but it's more like you have to go there, you have to say, look, I'm at par with y'all, I know my stuff, I'm talking sense. Why do you need all those riders? Why do you need all those, preambles to your functioning? You wouldn't expect that of a man. And therefore, the hesitation in the minds of women is more like, I had enough of proving myself, you be where you want to be. Honestly, it is not a cynical staying away. It is time and time again when you ask to, oh, you've come to this board, okay. A very good condescension to start with. After that, a bit more patronizing to help you with. No, we don't want any of that. We can do ourselves a lot of good and the board where we are appointed. So that hesitation is what is stopping women from undergoing these trainings, which are so required even for men, not just for women. Many of these independent directors who are men, I know what. I hope it is not an official speech of the finance minister. The moment you're in the company of your other women, you open up. And that's dangerous. And that's dangerous for women. So let me be on my guard. But I think today, there's a lot more realization that it doesn't help. And I know I'm talking also from the point of view of some of the public sector banks or public sector undertakings, which still have not found women directors. Some of them are paying the fine for it, saying, yeah, we have to pay a fine because we have not found, but my effort to find is not really getting realized. And here, now I'll probably be frank about women. As much as we say, in the case of women who have made it big in business, that there are icons, look how they've achieved and where they've reached. We also will have to take that bold step forward. How many of us have not really crossed that thin line and made it big in our areas of specialization? I can see some of them here, who've actually crossed that threshold in spite of all the odds and proved themselves that in their area of, or in their domain specialization, they've really reached a level where they cannot but be recognized. So that little crossing of that threshold which we have set for ourselves is very important, and each one of us can do it. So we can have icons, we can look at different people who motivate us, who are encouraging enough also to support you in very many ways. But that bold step is yours. You need to take it, and once you take it, you'll know probably we have exaggerated to ourselves that it is difficult for women to function among men. It's not as bad as we think. And I started off the conversation by saying women have to prove once more, yet more, and all that. But that is an apprehension, and we rejoice in repeating the apprehension. I also sort of said it at the beginning, and we felt easy hearing it. But let me also assure you, cross that threshold, you realize for what you're worth, you're recognized. There can be few people among men who would be condescending, but many others are not. And I think even among women or even among men, there can be people who have perceptions, opinions, and also prejudices about one another, male or female, irrespective. So the underlying message is, it is all right for us to continue with that apprehension constantly ringing in our ears, but it is for us to cross the threshold, and once you cross, you're taken seriously for what you are. So please, let's not live in that comfortable cocoon which tells us, no, it's a tough world out there. Tough world everywhere. And I wouldn't be standing before you if you thought tough world, women cannot survive. Politics is one world, which I'm sure in each one of your families would say, God, politics? And I'd say this deriving from my own personal experience. When I decided to come into full-time politics, I don't have a family which has spent decades in politics. Nobody in my family, particularly my case, nobody has been in politics. And also because the middle class value system very strongly tells you that's a very tough and rough world, women should not be in there. And middle class people cannot afford to be in there. But I don't know what guided me, I'm there, but I can tell you, from the time I entered, there has never been a day that I need to regret. There's not been one day which I need to regret. So it is the crossing of the threshold. It's the crossing of the threshold which is important, and it is there that MentorMyBoard will have to not just inform you about how to function when sitting in a board, because there you have all kinds of roles to play. As a member appointed, you'll of course have statutory roles to play. You also have a fiduciary role to play. And all those requires a lot more honing of skills, a lot more training people who are informed in that area. But what MentorMyBoard should do for women is, you've come this far to sit in this training, but you should now be ready to get into the board to play your role. That mental, breaking off that barrier is what is the first and a big step in training. And I'm sure unless you do that, you're not going to have people coming. And also the 300 all that you have already trained are, I'm sure, thanking you for what you've extended as a training. So when directors sit on the board and they take key decisions, both on the statutory and also fiduciary aspects of the board, you are there to perform a role. And not just for the company's good, but for the nation's good. I straight away question, I also straight away place before you, any company and its performance is so critical for the country as much as it is critical for the company itself. In each sector, a company, particularly those listed, even more so for the unlisted, but more listed, for them to be a well-governed company. And to be a well-governed company, its directors will have to be constantly on the vigil, not about their own company, but also about what is developing in the market, what you hear in the market, and what other companies are doing, and what are the newer global standards of good governance for a company. So every one of these aspects, you should have your own information source. The company for a board of directors will also give you material, that is fine, do go through them. But are you considerably informed about how global best practices are? How a company's boards behaving? What are the threats to the company's boards? Who can cause a bit of a problem about, information which is board's privy? These are things which make you bring value addition to the board. If you just are talking about what's been given to you and on that doing a good job, that's fine. But what is the value addition you can bring? These are the kind of things on which you should constantly keep conscious of the developments which are happening around in the world. And today, you see the enthusiasm of the Indian investor, the retail particularly. Those who go through the mutual funds anyway get information through the funds, and they constantly keep informing about which company is performing like what and so on. But those retailers who are coming in, and this I say with a certain confidence, in the sense belief that what I'm saying is backed by the trends which are coming out. People are now being very, very sharp about what data is available in the public domain. Listed companies and their data is gone through by every retail investor in his own capacity. And of course, he cross-checks that with his chartered accountant or with any other professional, so that he gets to know all the calibrations with which the records are filed. And based on that confidence that everything is up there for him to see, retailers don't even go through the mutual funds, but are there directly in the market to invest. The sum of that, or the essence of that, is when companies, well-managed, well-governed companies, put out their data. Today it is out there for everyone to see, and that has encouraged people to come up with their savings into the market. That itself has made India worth watching. So the better managed companies are appreciated even by retail investors, and they, on the basis of information disclosed, take a call. Now, sitting in such a company, on the board, you as a woman can bring in that value addition to that company, and that's exactly what I think you should go in there for. It cannot be a comfortable men's club. You have to get in there. You have to get in there with your perspectives, and that perspective also can have certain aspects which have never been considered, because, it was very interesting today. I was watching a podcast. I wouldn't get into the detail because it was a political podcast. But the essence of what that podcast used as its assumption was, when groups of people keep meeting very often, which is what happens in the high table in politics or strategy or defense or anywhere else, and I'm sure that's what happens among companies. When repeatedly one set of people who are the ones who take business decisions keep meeting, a lot of ideas are churned around, a lot of ideas are shared, and that then becomes a bit contagious. It spreads, and it sort of gets reinforced, and that becomes the norm. Now, when that comfort zone is a bit checked, or when it is questioned through the presence of, let us say, a woman who thinks completely in a different dimension, let us say, not all women do, and not all need to do it. But because you bring not the club's view, but your view, it actually gives a new set of thoughts into that board. I'm not discouraging socialization among board members, which happens frequently among men. And we, wherever we are, have some little limitations in joining that clique for socialization. So your thought process is more your own, or by your readings, by your experiences, by your interaction outside of that clique, outside of your board, outside of your immediate colleagues. And as a result, you certainly bring in the benefit of different angularities, which I think strengthens the board's information base on which they can take a collective decision. So it is important for us to have that courage and conviction to say, I can bring in material difference to the board into which I go, and therefore you shouldn't hesitate and you should get going into that. The gender balance is what the Western governance models will rest on. We need to have gender balance, get more women into the board. That's all right. But I think idea balance is what is more required rather than gender balance. And I think on that score, women stand to gain. That advantage should be used. Boards should make special effort to draw on women. And there's also this allegation, which probably has some basis, that repeatedly the same set of women are finding place in boards. There are some women who are repeatedly in so many different boards. Well, if many of us don't want to go, some of them will keep repeating. So I think we should also break that, the pool from which I'm selecting the board members is very limited, so I will keep choosing from that. Widen the pool, get into the pool, broad base the pool. We all need to be in it. Women-friendly decisions of the government, board-driven process, IBC, I can always list out all that the government has done. But what I find is important is to first of all, as you train them, understand what are the expectations of women who want to come into the board. It can't just be, this is what is available. Men have served on the boards for several years, decades, now you come and join in. No, I'm sorry. The ecosystem, the terms, the kind of expectations will now have to be reviewed. You want more women? We can definitely occupy the place. But are the terms somewhat at least recognizing the need for a review? The terms will have to be looked, not that you're giving me a different pay pack or, charge per sitting, I want a higher, no, not that. What are the conditions in which you want these women to come in? What are the kind of roles you will assign them? What are the kind of ways in which you're going to have them decide along with the rest of them? Boards will also have to rethink the ways in which you're going to engage women, the terms in which they're brought in, and also the attempts which are being made by the board will have to be open and explicit. Are you making the effort? Tell us how. I've not got to know about your board. I love to come there because I have the qualification. So why can't it be a lot more open to say, look, this is the board which want more women, we are this, we can provide this, these are the terms of engagement. There should be more of it. So I would think it is a two-way process. We can very often, deride ourselves, saying we don't seem to be enthusiastic, we don't want to go about, we don't want to be, enthusiastic to go into a board. But no, it has to be both ways. Because it's like, I was hearing Mithali Raj the other day, the Indian woman cricketer, much celebrated. She was asked a lot of questions about, you were the woman icon, you were the first one to come. Who was your icon? Who was your mentor? Who did you look up to? She said, when I went in, there were no women cricketers. Of course, I looked at Sachin Tendulkar because for the way he played cricket. But I had no woman mentor. But she became one. So that's the way in which you approach it. And simultaneously, the world also realized that women's cricket also can be a big thing. So that's the kind of analogy I will look at. Boards need to provide more space. There should be more Mithali Rajas into the boards. And that's where the world will keep doors open for women to come in. I don't need to say it here, but I think most of you are aware, SEBI has mandated that under the listing obligations and disclosure requirements, appointment of at least one woman independent director for bigger listed companies is mandatory. It might be worth our while to take a list of all the listed companies, big companies, and see where there are no women. Write to them and say, why won't you want to have women there? Be part of the system to change. There are some trends which I want to place before you so that you are aware of it. The overall number of women directors has increased post that introduction of that mandatory clause from the SEBI, which was brought in 2013, but it has taken its own time. A majority of the NSE listed companies have appointed the minimum mandated requirement of at least one woman director. I don't know how NSE could reach 73%. I'd like Mr. Mundra to see about BSE's own listed companies. The average number of women on boards is 1.03. About 58% of all women are independent directors. About 58% of the women are independent directors and 42% are non-independent directors. I'm not so much worried about the non-independent directors. Even there is a concern. We see in the media how families hesitate to bring in their girl heirs, the daughters, onto the board and rather prefer an outsider than have their own daughters come onto the board. There are also such things, but that is a very family-specific issue. Well-educated, highly educated women are joining the boards. 51% of all women directors hold a master's degree. And about 38, meaning master's degree and above, and about 38% hold bachelor's degree, if that helps us to know what is the kind of education profile with which they come. Nifty 50 companies have often hired the same women to their boards. Nifty 50 companies have often hired the same women to their boards. 14 women hold 5 to 6 directorship positions across NSE listed companies. 7 women hold 7 directorship positions each. That's a very revealing number. It doesn't have to be so concentrated. There are also attempts to evade the mandate which is under the company's law. Of the women who served on more than one board, showed 40% of the women directors received their second appointment within 6 months of earlier appointment. Also, 15% of the appointments on the next board were made in less than a month of the earlier appointment. These are obviously getting tracked. These are obviously getting noticed by the MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. These are getting noticed. A study was conducted on a sample of about 1,000 companies operating out of 12 countries, and that showed that on the one hand, average profitability of companies was higher by about 43% with diverse boards, and on the other, companies with non-diverse boards showed only a 29% decrease in profitability. It cannot be just a coincidence. So if profitability can be the biggest temptation to have your board much more diverse than what it is now, I think that point should also be underlined. So we are not asking for inclusivity, we are not asking for gender parity. You want more profit? Get me in. In a 2015 report which was done by the McKinsey Group, it was shown that $28 trillion, or about 26% of what would be added to the global annual GDP, if only women participated to their fullest potential in the economy. So beginning the board down to the fields, agricultural fields, we want greater participation of women. So as a way forward, I would think you call it gender diversity, you call it inclusivity, data shows profitability. What more do you want to have more women? Come in, please. Oh, you boards, just as we stand before Lord whoever. Oh, you Bhagwan, Oh, you boards, what more do you want? Inclusivity, gender parity, better decision making, and even money. Get us in. Industry themselves will have to take the lead. There's just no way in which I can speak differently. Government cannot do any more nudging. Government cannot be breathing down on behalf of, ironically, 50% of the population. Even if it is 50% of the population, governance models being what it is, I can only but nudge. So get the 50% in, cannot be said. So the pressure, the nudge, the reasoning, the building of greater sense of conscious decision making has to come from the society itself. All of us will have to speak. All of us will have to be pushing this agenda. The beneficial impact of women being on the boards need not be exaggerated. And also on the question of hiring women, there's always been this hesitation. Do you want to hire her? She'll go off sooner on maternity leave, and then she comes, you'll have to reskill her. Today in the West, we are seeing a reality, and a hard reality at that. Post the COVID, the number of people reporting back to work is shockingly low, and that is men reporting to work. United States actually has put out data saying men are not coming back to work. Men and women maybe, but interestingly, even men don't want to go back to work. So what could be the hesitation for them to go back to work? Were you able to predict? When you recruit a woman, you have this thing about, oh, what if she gets, to go on maternity leave? Could you predict post-COVID that men are not going to come back to work, men or women are not going to come back to work? You're readjusting the work model based on the situation that has developed, which you couldn't keep in mind, which you couldn't predict. So that itself should be an alarm bell, that unless work is seen from the perspective of man and women, and also make sure that any kind of a black swan event can have the probability of some section reporting back to work, may not be some other section. So the scope has to be widened for the workforce. And only then are you going to be in a comfortable zone when there are such exigencies which arise. I move one step forward, not going to take too much time. Leadership positions. When women take leadership positions, and it's happening quite a lot now, we are quoting a lot of Indian women who are taking leadership positions outside, Indian women who have also taken leadership position here, you find the performance, if anything, is equal or even better than when they were not heading the institution. So I find it important that companies should mentally, company as a organic whole, should mentally ready themselves also to have a fresh bout on leadership with women coming in, because that brings a narrative completely different, profile completely different, articulation which is completely even better than otherwise. So I think even not finding a place as independent director, as a workforce participation, bring in more women to work, but only those monotonous jobs, everywhere. And certainly in the leadership roles, we need women to come in. And for that, again, the companies will have to spend some more time to see how best they can reorganize, reset post-COVID to aspire for all this. There's no good if we keep saying it cannot happen overnight. These are things which are going to take time. I think lots of time has been given. The force now will have to be from both sides, the company sides and also from all our side. We also need to make sure that once we get in there, we are there without giving any excuses. And I'm very sure the rate at which we produce doctors and engineers, we literally produce doctors and engineers for the entire world. That is why India's capacity in STEM is something which the whole world is looking at with a certain sense of awe. They think, how can India manage this? Similar should be the way in which we get into leadership positions, boards, and also the workforce. There is just no excuse. I think the pressure should be from our side. Make us visible. We should be far more visible. We should be far more out there saying about our capabilities. We cannot be ignored any longer. And I'm sure the policy and the government's support is there, definitely without doubt. I can start from Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao onwards. The number of steps Honorable Prime Minister has taken. And he, for one, didn't hesitate even in his first address from Red Fort to talk about how safety of women matters. He didn't, in fact, he was very clear. He asked the parents of India, saying, as much as you ask your daughters, where have you been? It's 6 o'clock. Why didn't you get into the house in time before it became dark? You should train your sons on how they should conduct themselves as regards, women. And also make sure that man and women have parity at home. Give them both the equal exposure for serving the household. He also went further to talk about sanitary napkins. On the issue of women, Prime Minister is absolutely keen, and he's one who's set examples by putting action where his mouth is. He's shown that he trusts women in leadership. Repeatedly, he's supported very many women in very many different roles. Whether it is Swachhata Abhiyan, which actually showed a difference on women and children's health. The leadership that he showed in the Swachhata, which has become a national mission today. There were reported studies which showed what impact it had when you had greater, cleaner villages for the women of those villages. And data was there, available even before, that women cooking with a firewood or a coal-driven chula were inhaling about 200 cigarettes per day. The entire Ujjwala program, which went, the first connection between the connection being given was given free to the poorest households. And even today, when the prices have skyrocketed of cooking gas, we give 200 rupees per cylinder for the poorest households who are covered under the Ujjwala scheme for any number of cylinders that they may want in a year. It's not restricted, only up to 3, we won't give for the 4th. No. For any number of cylinders that they would want, they will get 200 rupees each for the cylinder that they will use in their houses. For STEM sciences, again, studies, a lot of digital access is being given for women so that they can benefit from digital education. So I don't want to take this opportunity to talk about government's policies, but the point that I want to underline here is any support which will help women to find their due place in the boards or in the fields or in the workstations or in shop floors. The government is willing to do it, and this is just the best opportunity best time when India's now reached the 5th largest economy in terms of the money, the ranking that we've got, removing Great Britain from it. 10 years ago, we were in the 11th position and UK was in the 5th position. We have, in a matter of 10 years, moved in such speed that we've reached the 5th position and displaced United Kingdom. A sweet pleasure. All this would not be possible if the government is not listening to the people and responding to them. And again, if 50% of the population is women, and Prime Minister even now talking about next 25 years, Amrit Kal, spoke about Nari Shakti, even in this Independence Day's speech from Red Fort. He and the entire government believes in women power, women-led development. So I would appeal to you all, when we are meeting in a very joyous occasion to celebrate the work done by MentorMyBoard, I would want each one of you all to make sure that we contribute in the next 25 years. And our contribution would be noticeable and would take India to be a developed country by 2047. And it's not as a platitude that I want to say this. If every country sets itself some, targets, some norms, and people say, what would you want India to be like in 2047 and so on, there's no point in us saying there should be a woman prime minister, there should be a woman president. All that is possible. It's all right, it will happen. But like in some countries, we should, and before I say the point that I want to say, even as it is now at the panchayat level, I think the number of women elected to panchayats are running in tens of lakhs. I think about 35 to 40 lakh women are already governing our villages. And these kind of changes, people mocked at that time when this reservation was being brought in for women to get into the panchayat, 1/3 being reserved for them. They said, none of this. Her husband or her father would run the place and she'll only be a token. Just come with me to the villages. You will find some of the best of administrators, some tough cookies who will never bother about the comments being said. She'll stand there and question. They are there in the villages, running the villages. So for all those who spoke that she'll only be a proxy, time has proved that they were wrong. And that's exactly what I want to see in 2047. Time will show that Indian women will be in remarkable positions in every layer of our economy, every layer of our governance, and top the leadership. Your contribution should be known. So MentorMyBoard, thank you very much for calling me to have me here. BSc, thank you very much also for having given us the space to have this exchange. Look forward to having a lot of you succeed in your attempts, in your best endeavors, in your businesses. So thank you very much and Jai Hind. Bharat Mata Ki Jai.